The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome. Before we get started, we want to make sure that people can hear us okay. So if you can hear me speaking, it would be great if you could raise your hand. That lets us know that the audio is working and awesome. Thank you. And you can go ahead and lower your hands because we'll use that later on to call for stakeholder feedback. So welcome and thank you for attending the State Board of Accountancy stakeholder meeting via webinar today. It is February 11th, 2022, and the time is 10:01 a.m. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm a regulatory analyst with the division. Also attending is Karen Phelan, Program Director, and Elena Kemp, Regulatory Coordinator. Due to concerns surrounding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting revisions to the rules. More specifically, today we will be discussing multiple proposed changes to the State Board of Accountancy's rules pursuant to the rule review mandated by Section 24.4.103.3 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The purpose of the rule review is to assess the continuing need, appropriateness, and cost effectiveness of the rules to determine if they should be continued in their current form, modified, or repealed. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the board's website under the Public Notices tab by the close of business on Monday. As the stakeholder meeting is held solely by webinar, please raise your hand by using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you will be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comment in the question section, and we'll read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, we ask that anyone providing comments please state your name and the name of the organization that you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 to 5 minutes and try not to repeat something that was already said. Stating you're in full agreement with someone else works just fine and will be noted. If you are using the audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. So at this point in time, I think it might be helpful before we start to ask for stakeholder feedback. I will walk through the proposed changes and explain a little bit of information about them and why they're being proposed. So for purposes of background, as I mentioned, the statute requiring mandatory rule review is 24.4.103.3. You can see there on this screen the statutory criteria that is being considered by the board. So the current draft rules that you are going to see today and that were sent out as part of this rulemaking hearing with the notice, or not rulemaking hearing, stakeholder meeting with the notice, have already been seen by the board twice, and we are at the beginning of the process. So after we receive stakeholder feedback today regarding the proposed changes, those comments will be taken back to the board during its meeting and will be discussed by the board during the open meeting, and then we'll come back before stakeholders before the rulemaking hearing. So we encourage you to continue to submit comments. The comments that we received today, like I said, this recording will be given to the board before its next meeting. And then also comments that we received that are written comments that are specific to certain rules, we incorporate throughout the rules as comments so that it's easy for everyone to see. So you'll notice that if comments that we've received up to date have been incorporated into these rules. So if you don't mind jumping back up, Elena, and I'll go through from the beginning, sorry. So to start off, new rules, proposed new rules 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. the purpose of adding these new rules is simply to comply with the Secretary of State styling manual. So you can see at the beginning, this is consistent with the other board and program rules throughout the division, and also in compliance with the Secretary of State styling manual. It sets forth the statutory authority for the promulgation of the rules, the scope and purpose and applicability. So for people who are looking at the rules, all of that is clear at the beginning. So there's going to be some renumbering throughout based on those added new rules. You'll also see that the introductory paragraph at the beginning of what will potentially be Rule 1.4, and that gives the statutory authority at the beginning of each rule for the promulgation of that rule so that individuals can cross-reference the statute. So I'll mention that here. You'll see it throughout. I won't go throughout. I won't explain each one because it's the same, different statutes, but the same language. So for ease of reading, we did add in the comments the statutory language so that individuals can see the statute right within the rules. So you'll notice that once, of course, this goes to rulemaking, that language will be removed before it gets filed. So here are the comments that we've received so far from COCPA that have been added in, and I'm sure that members of the association are present today, so we would like to hear from you as well, but I just wanted to note that so you are aware. So the comments on the side, if there's duplication, so one of the statutory criteria that the board looks at during rule review is whether the rule duplicates any other statutory regulations, other language that is elsewhere. So it could be federal law, state law. And so here the board is proposing to strike anywhere there's duplication, and you can see the notes in the comments there. So we tried to make it as transparent as possible for the rationale behind the board's discussions. Another thing that we hopefully did catch, although a board member noticed a place where we did not, and so we will continue to look at these throughout this process, is to change any pronouns to be gender neutral throughout. So we struck, the suggestion is to strike that here and then update the pronouns throughout the document to be gender neutral. Again, you can see where there's duplication, and so that what I pointed out earlier about having the statutory reference noted in the comments along with the red line so that people can follow along. So this section of the rules is specifically about incorporation by reference. So incorporating a standard or guideline directly into the rules. So we are going to, we talked with the board about updating those because you have to, by statute, it requires that you put the specific date of the guideline or standard that you want to incorporate in the rules. So you see that in the comments there, but the plan is to update these to make sure that they are current. You just scroll through these just let people know, you can keep going, Elena, that you can always find the draft rules on the board's website as we go through this process under the public notices tab. And then they get emailed out to interested stakeholders and licensees in advance of any stakeholder meeting and also in advance of a rulemaking hearing. So, and if you ever have questions or you can't locate them, the email address that we include on the notice for the meeting, that's the best way to reach out to us, which is Dora_DPO_rulemaking@state.co.us. And you can see in the comments too, some of the board discussion and questions specifically posed to stakeholders. If there's ever any confusion about the comments, we try to keep everything in one document for simplicity, but if there's ever any confusion about what's in the comments, or if you ever have any questions and need us to clarify, we're happy to do that as well. The suggestion here, so to change it from the reporting requirement from 45 days to 30 days, is to make sure that the boards and programs within the division have consistent reporting requirements, and also for purposes of consumer protection. If someone does have one of these things that they need to report to the division, then it should be done sooner rather than later, so that the board, if necessary, can take action against the licensee. We do appreciate also the comments and the time that people spend to submit them, and I want people to know as well that your stakeholder feedback during this process isn't just limited to what's been redlined or what's being proposed by the board. Ideally, we would like to receive the feedback sooner rather than later so that the board can weigh in and openly discuss the proposed changes at the next meeting. So if there's something that you have a question about or something in the rules that you're concerned about, now is a good opportunity to raise those questions or concerns so that we can have that back and forth dialogue between members of the public and licensees and the board in advance of the rulemaking hearing so that all of that gets worked out before the hearing. So as we get to the end of the rules, hopefully that overview gives you a better idea of really the purpose of the rule review and what the board's currently looking at. So if you would like to provide stakeholder comments, now would be an opportunity for you to do that. So you can raise your hand and we can unmute your line, or you can type into the question function of the webinar and we can read your comments out loud for the recording. And we can either do however you want to present the comments. If you want to present, if you have multiple rules you'd like to weigh in on, you could do it all at once, or we can have an open discussion between stakeholders as well. So we will just monitor to see if anyone would like to provide comments. Or ask questions too. Okay, quiet group. We'll wait for a few more minutes just to make sure that we give people a chance to speak if you would like to speak. And then, like I said earlier, you're always welcome to submit written comments. Those do get sent to the board before they review the rules at the meeting, and then also before the rulemaking hearing. And we post those written comments as well on the board's website under the public notices tab. That's where we put all of the information for rulemaking. You can find the notices on the DORA and board calendar as well. So we try to make the information available in as many locations as possible. Mary Medley, I see that you can respond to questions. If you would like to say anything else, I'm happy to unmute your line. I don't have any questions for you. I don't know if other members who are participating have questions. Karen, I don't know if you have questions. Mary, I've unmuted you on our end. You're self-muted. If you want to weigh in or say anything else, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll just take your.
I'm actually monitoring another meeting I'm supposed to be in at the same time, so you're hearing a lot of background noise. That's why I have kept myself muted. However, that issue around whether people can claim those 2 hours of CR&R they use for licensing would be really helpful for the board to resolve.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll wait until 10:25 before we go ahead and wrap up the meeting, unless anyone else would like to provide any comments. Okay, so question from Mary Medley, what's the next step regarding incorporating proposed changes suggested by the COCPA and or others, and or that others provide? So we'll go through that and give you the dates here when we wrap up, so that you have them for the next time the board reviews and the next stakeholder meeting, etc. All right, I'm not seeing any raised hands and we haven't received any other questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you for participating in today's meeting. As part of this collaborative process, all comments and program recommendations will be provided to the board for review before the next board meeting on March 16th, 2022. Then any additional rule revisions from the board will be presented to stakeholders at the next stakeholder meeting on April 8th, 2022. So March 16th is the board meeting, April 8th is the next stakeholder meeting. Then the board will deliberate on the final version of the rules at the permanent rulemaking hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for May 11th, 2022. So at that rulemaking hearing on May 11th, stakeholders will have a final opportunity to address the board via testimony before the board deliberates and decides whether to adopt the proposed changes. Ideally, like I mentioned, it's best to get any proposed changes to us sooner rather than later, so that one, we can take it to the board before that meeting on the 16th, and two, so that other stakeholders can weigh in regarding the proposed changes. We don't like to have surprises at the rulemaking hearing for the board and for members of the public, so we want this to go through the process and give as many people who would want an opportunity to weigh in to have that opportunity. So hopefully that helps explain the next steps. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. And in the meantime, that does conclude our stakeholder meeting, and we thank you for participating. And we are going to end the webinar at this time.